We often think about, the obvious energy sources. Food, sleep, maybe that coffee first thing.
Yeah.
But what if the real key players are these tiny, tiny powerhouses inside, well, almost every single one of your cells? We're talking about mitochondria today.
Exactly. And it's really fascinating because when they're not working right, what scientists call mitochondrial dysfunction, it pops up in so many different illnesses. Dr. Verhoeven mentioned things like insulin resistance, type 2 diabetes, heart disease, even cancer and neurodegenerative diseases.
Wow.
Yeah, it really shows how, fundamental they are.
Absolutely. So, listener, our mission for this deep dive, with guidance from Dr. Nicholas Verhoeven of Physionic Disease, he's fantastic on nutrition and science stuff last, is to figure out what you can actually do. How can you keep your mitochondria healthy and, well, happy? Okay, so let's start at the beginning. What are mitochondria? Why should we care beyond, just feeling tired in the afternoon?
Right. So at their core, they're organelles. Think of them like specialized structures, like tiny factories inside most of our cells. And yeah, most people know them as the powerhouse of the cell. They generate cellular energy, ATP. That's the main job people think of.
The energy factor, yeah.
Yeah.
Got it. But it sounds like they're doing a lot more than just churning out energy.
Oh, definitely. Way more. They're huge in cell signaling, basically, how different parts of the cell talk to each other. They also generate other compounds the cell needs. They sort of sequester molecules, ions, keep things balanced. And get this, they're critical for biosynthesis, making new stuff. Like hormones, cortisol, testosterone, estrogen production relies on them.
Hormones? Really? I wouldn't have connected mitochondria to hormone production. How does that work?
Well, it's pretty complex, but certain key steps in making those steroid hormones, they happen inside the mitochondria. So if your mitochondria aren't running efficiently, it can definitely impact hormone levels. And another thing, they help protect against cancer. They're part of the system that tells damaged cells, okay, time to self-destruct. It's crucial.
So, okay, it's way bigger than just feeling tired if they're not working properly.
Precisely. Yeah, low energy is part of it, sure. But the energy they make, it fuels everything in the cell, transporting things, enzyme reactions, making proteins, everything. If mitochondria are struggling, the whole cell struggles. It's an energy crisis at the cellular level.
Okay, these things are multitasking ninjas inside our cells. But what about when they don't work? Mitochondrial dysfunction, what does that actually mean?
Yeah, good question. Simply put, it just means they aren't functioning in their, let's say, normal healthy range. Researchers look at things like oxygen consumption rate. They isolate mitochondria and see how much oxygen they're using. More oxygen usually means better function.
So happy mitochondria breathe heavily, so to speak.
Kind of, yeah. Or they measure ATP generation directly. How much of that energy currency are they actually making?
Got it. Low oxygen use, low ATP, red flags. But you mentioned, and Dr. Verhoeven hinted, there are other ways they can fail. It's not just low power output.
Right, and this is where it gets really interesting and maybe a bit complex. Dysfunction isn't just about energy. A big one is losing membrane potential. Think of the mitochondrion having two membranes, an inner and outer one. Inside, it's meant to be more negatively charged than outside. This difference, this electrical potential, is vital, like a battery. If that potential drops, if the inside gets less negative, the whole thing can just shut down and eventually die off.
Okay, that sounds pretty critical, like pulling the plug in the factory.
Exactly. And then there's mitophagy. That's the cell's cleanup crew for damaged mitochondria.
Like a recycling program.
Precisely. But if mitophagy is defective, those damaged ones hang around, causing more problems. They don't get cleared out. You can also get proteotoxicity, basically a buildup of junk proteins, misfolded proteins, or proteins ending up where they shouldn't, gunking up the works. Dr. Verhoeven's lab actually looked into this, how proteins can get mistargeted and just interfere with normal function.
Like putting sand in the gears. Makes sense.
Yeah. And then there's physical damage from too many reactive oxygen species. ROS, oxidative stress. Now, ROS aren't all bad, they have signaling roles, but excessive ROS, that damages the mitochondria. Oh, and he briefly mentioned calcium buffering issues, too, as another potential problem among, well, many others.
Okay, wow. Lots of ways things can go wrong. So the million-dollar question, what causes this dysfunction? What triggers it?
A major trigger, as we touched on, is that excessive ROS, oxidative stress. Dr. Verhoeven explained it using the electron transport chain, that conveyor belt system inside mitochondria. When you have lots of fuel coming in from food but not much demand for energy, for ATP, electrons can kind of slip off the belt.
Like an overflow.
Sort of. And that slippage generates extra ROS. Think of it like pushing too much fuel through an engine that's idling. You get inefficient burning, sparks maybe.
So too much food, not enough activity. Overconsumption and lack of a metabolic sink, as he put it.
Exactly. Lack of a metabolic sink is just not using enough ATP, often from, not exercising enough. And he talked about chronic overeating crossing your personal fat threshold. When your normal fat storage, subcutaneous fat, is full, fat starts getting stored elsewhere. Liver, muscle, pancreas, ectopic fat. And those tissues aren't designed for bulk fat storage. That excess fuel overwhelms the mitochondria in those cells, ramps up ROS, causes dysfunction right there.
So it matters where the extra fuel ends up, not just that there is extra fuel. That threshold idea is interesting.
Absolutely. Now, genetics also plays a role. Some people are just born with issues, ranging from really severe problems to milder stuff. Genetic mitochondrial diseases like meiosis or melopas, specific gene mutations can mess things up.
And what do those genetic conditions look like?
It varies a lot, but Dr. Verhoeven mentioned things like fatty acids building up in cells, which can link to insulin resistance, or even apoptosis, programmed cell death, affecting different organs. He also linked genetics to other conditions where mitochondria are involved, like Huntington's, that protein buildup on mitochondria. And Alzheimer's, again with protein issues, though he stressed mitochondria are involved, not necessarily the sole cause.
Okay, so some of it is genetic luck,
Huh.
but what about the stuff we can control more, like diet and lifestyle?
Right. We covered overconsumption already. But the type of food matters, too. He mentioned a study suggesting unsaturated fats might be better for mitochondria than saturated fats. Specifically, palmitate, a common saturated fat, seemed to increase oxidative stress and cell death in mitochondria in that study. So the takeaway is, even if your mitochondria start healthy, too much fuel, and maybe the wrong kind of fuel, can push them towards dysfunction.
Good point. It's not just calories, but the source. Now, you mentioned tissue specificity earlier. Why can fat cells handle loads of fat okay, but muscle cells struggle?
Yeah, that's a key point. Fat cells are built for it, right? They store fat in big lipid droplets. Muscle and liver cells, not so much. Dr. Verhoeven pointed out a cool difference. In trained athletes, muscle lipid droplets are often small and right next to mitochondria, like a handy fuel stash. But in insulin-resistant people, those droplets might be bigger, maybe further away, and linked to the resistance itself. Location, context, it all matters.
So a planned fuel stop versus a messy spill. Got it.
That's a good way to think about it. He also mentioned fat tissue is dynamic, there's turnover, immune cells might be involved. The overall idea is that dysfunction probably looks different in different tissues and different diseases. It depends on genes, lifestyle. It's complex.
Okay, this sounds a bit concerning. But exercise, you said exercise helps. How does that work for mitochondria?
Exercise is huge. It creates that metabolic sink Dr. Verhoeven talked about. When you exercise, your muscles scream for ATP.
Yeah.
That uses up the fuel molecules, reduces the backlog, less electron slippage, less ROS.
Ah, so you're burning off the excess fuel, basically.
Basically, yes. And biochemically, when ATP breaks down to ADP and AMP during exercise, that increase in AMP and ADP, it flips a switch. It activates an enzyme called AMPK. And AMPK is like a master regulator for mitochondrial health.
Yeah.
It tells the cell via another factor called PGC1 alpha, hey, build more mitochondria. It stimulates mitochondrial biogenesis.
Making new mitochondria.
Exactly. So exercise makes your current mitochondria work better and tells your body to build more, increases your total capacity.
That's fantastic. A double benefit. Exercise is just always good news. What about other things people talk about, like light therapy or antioxidants?
Right. He touched on near-infrared light. Some studies suggest it might help mitochondrial efficiency, maybe interacting directly with the electron transport chain or through signaling. But he also cautioned that these studies are tricky to control well. Antioxidants, though, especially polyphenols from fruits and veggies, he described them as helping to quiet the burn of oxidative stress. They neutralize some of that excess ROS. Plus, exercise itself actually boosts your mitochondria's own internal antioxidant system.
So, fruits and veggies, get moving. Sounds like solid advice we've heard before, but now we know why on a deeper level.
Exactly. And cardiovascular health matters, too. Things like atherosclerosis, blocked arteries mean less oxygen gets to tissues. That harms mitochondria. And reperfusion injury, when oxygen rushes back too quickly after being cut off, that can also cause damage. It just shows how it's all connected: overall health and mitochondrial health.
This has been super insightful. Okay, I bet a lot of listeners are thinking, How do I know how my mitochondria are doing? Can we actually test for this?
Yeah, that's the logical next question. He did mention specialized gene tests, like at the Mayo Clinic, for specific genetic mitochondrial diseases, but that's usually through a doctor. And a big caveat he mentioned is that a sample from one tissue, like skin or muscle, might not tell you the whole story for your entire body. So unfortunately, right now, there aren't really easy, accessible tests for general mitochondrial function or dysfunction for the average person.
Okay. No silver blood test yet then.
Not really, not in a widespread way. We talked about V2 max maybe as a rough proxy for overall capacity, but it measures lung function, heart function too. It's not just mitochondria.
Right. So testing is tricky, but based on this whole conversation, what are the main takeaways? What can people listening do?
Well, the big picture is really encouraging, actually. The things that are good for your general health, they're really good for your mitochondria. So the advice might sound familiar, but hopefully now you understand the why behind it much better. Number one, eat a nutrient-rich diet, lots of fruits, vegetables that give you antioxidants, help with satiety, so you're less likely to overeat. Number two, regular physical activity, both, actual workouts and just moving more, sitting less. That creates the metabolic sink, boosts existing mitochondria, and tells your body to make more.
So it really boils down to those pillars of healthy living we often talk about.
It really does. And even though you can't easily test your mitochondrial function right now, you absolutely can influence it through your daily choices.
That's a powerful thought to end on. Okay, listener, maybe as you go through your day today, think about those trillions of tiny powerhouses working away inside you. Prioritizing their health really seems fundamental for long-term wellness and preventing disease, even if we don't see them directly.
Yeah, maybe ask yourself, what's one small thing you could shift today to give those cellular energy factories a bit more support?
Great question. And huge thanks to Dr. Nicholas Verhoeven for all this insight. If you want more from him, definitely check out his YouTube channel, Physionic. That's Physionic. Just search for it. It's a great resource. We'll pop a link in the show notes too, if possible. Clearly, this is a vital area, and our understanding is still growing. Exciting stuff.